If you are hungry and if you're thirsty, they will bring you food and drink. That's why I am so confident with our military and with our people defending our state, because our state is very special and our people are very special, and I don't want them destroyed. I want them all to remain, not only in history. I don't want Ukraine's history to be a legend about 300 Spartans. I want peace, and I want peace in my country. We are on our land, we are ready for anything.
So that is among the latest public statements from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, not only inspiring the fighters in Ukraine, but also, again, reassuring the civilians that there will be aid for them. And also, I think it's a very good reference there to the Spartans, because there's a lot of international attention on what's going on right now. But I think there's also perhaps a readiness to sort of divorce our feelings about it from the day-to-day reality, that we start to see it through other lenses of history or geopolitical like machinations. No, he's not just interested in what we take away from this. He is interested in the experience of the soldiers and civilians that are dying literally as Brett and I record this. And so I'm glad that he is focusing people's attention on that. We have a lot of developments coming out of Ukraine that we're gonna jump into in 1 minute. But Brett, what did you make of the president's statement?
It's tough. It is. So you have someone who himself was, a lot of people don't know the actual legend of the 300. They know it through, the intrepid storytelling of Gerard Butler and company and like Zack Snyder, right? So this president himself was in entertainment. He understands the power of storytelling, and this is, and that's as far as I understand of him, what I know of him, because we only know him through the few bits of Ukrainian news that made its way into the headlines, albeit they were giant headlines for a while. And that is a very tempting and dangerous trap for us to fall into, specifically because Americans and America is only doing so much to help these people because of the larger geopolitical threats and briar patches, and for lack of a better term, like it's a powder keg that could ignite if we do too much. And as this is happening, you see one of our producers on Damage Report, or on on Watch List, Emily, she was like going through an app, and one of those like face changer apps. And now one of the face changer options is to just put your face on Volodymyr Zelensky's face. It has become this like, ain't he great, ain't he cool thing. Yeah. And it's so easy to forget that there are human beings losing their lives, and an entire, geopolitical environment and next 100 years that could be at stake based on what happens over the next few weeks. And that's the kind of thing that Volodymyr Zelensky is in an interesting position, because he has to show strength, but he would benefit from aid. And if you need aid, you aren't fully strong. And so you get these moments when he's sandwiched between having to inspire people and tell everyone that they are in grave existential danger.
Yeah, and he's done a great job of focusing on that. But you're right. You can't help but get caught up in it, especially obviously as you've talked about multiple times, the story of what he was before the president. But again, it is good that he is serving very well and at like in an inspiration capacity as well as a president. But there are a lot of people experiencing absolutely horrific conditions right now. And some of the updates I want to talk about include the effort to help some of those people. So on yesterday's show, we talked about them launching into a second round of talks, negotiations between Ukraine and Russia. That has now happened. Although coming out of it, the two sides have somewhat different views of what actually was accomplished. The head of the Russian delegation says, we managed to agree on some points, but the key thing that we've reached an agreement on today was a matter of rescuing civilians who found themselves in a military clash zone. Russian and Ukrainian defense ministries agreed on providing humanitarian corridors for civilians and on a possible temporary ceasefire in areas where evacuation is happening. The tone is a little bit different than one of the Ukrainian negotiators who tweeted, "The second round of negotiations is over. Unfortunately, the results Ukraine needs are not yet achieved. There is a solution only for the organization of humanitarian corridors." And that ... is there. You don't want your negotiator to be ... dotting the end of the summary of what happened. Like the tone there seems to be that Russia apparently doesn't yet consider themselves to be in a position where they really have to give much, but they do apparently. They've set up those corridors. So briefly, what do you think of that? Like, should we be happy that at least something has been reached?
Right. In this, yeah, I think we should be happy that something has been reached. However, when you put it in terms of humanitarian corridors, essentially they have only agreed that specific slivers of the Ukrainian battlefield are humane. Everything else is inhumane and up for grabs and a war zone.
Yeah.
And we have to remind ourselves that what Russia is doing, what Russia wants is to just change the regime and put in a strongman and then just put a bunch of Russian military assets behind it so that Russia can control Ukraine. They want to annex it, but once you have, as we talk about who has their hands on the wheels of power, in the gears of power in a country, can then make decisions that affect disproportionately way more people than want that legislation to be passed or want that policy to be passed, because the people, it's been infiltrated. And the Russians love setting up strongmen dictators in former Soviet socialist republics, which, as we've learned lately, is only for the end goal of reestablishing historical Russia, as they call it, which is just like a weird selection of words for an empire. And ostensibly they're saying, all the arguments put forth by Putin don't make any sense. And that's the frustrating thing that we run into, trying to make sense of it and the Ukrainian people in a negotiation, when really all they're asking for is stop invading us. Go back home. Why are you doing this? And Russia's like, well, we have 190,000 soldiers that we're gonna use to try to overthrow your country. And so if there's one thing that Russia is good at, it's throwing tons of death at something until they get their way.
Yeah.
The 22 million lives that died in World War II that were Soviet are evidence of that.
Exactly, yeah. Well, and he doesn't seem that dissuaded by the fact that they've been experiencing a lot of troubles up until this point.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.